What's up, everybody? It's Hank here with Break MMA. Today, I'm going to be doing a little UFC Milwaukee breakdown, basically the co-main and the main, which really sticks out, but go over a little bit of that with the little bit of the latest news in MMA. There's been some fights announced. There's been some fights coming up that we can discuss real quick. But my guest here today, Daren Loucks.
Hey man, how you doing?
He also has his own podcast, All 5 Rounds. Where can they find you? Is it on YouTube and Twitter, basically?
Yeah, YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. So at Daren Loucks on Twitter, and absolutely look up All 5 Rounds on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to tell you that too, and I'll do it on air because all my people know it. You know, I don't hide nothing from them. But what we were going to add, you got is that your partner or that you do the podcast?
Yeah. So I have a co-host with me, Ty O'Keefe.
Yeah, Ty.
Who does
We
it
was
with
going
me.
to add Ty to it, but we've got some complications. I'll show you what I'm using real quick. I'm Skyping you off my wife's phone, my wife's iPhone. That's what I'm Skyping you from. And then, as you can see, sitting down, I'm recording on YouTube with my phone, and I have you plugged up to a Beats pill. So the only thing I'm running off of is 2 iPhones and a Beats pill.
Okay.
So
all right.
What I was like I mentioned earlier, the best possible way, because I don't have Google Hangouts and my wife's phone doesn't have Google Hangouts, because where we have iCloud, it wants us to download the app and then do it through iCloud. You know, if you have an iPhone, it's not really Google, it's iCloud. So they want it to. You got to download and go through that. So that's why I mentioned that the easiest possible way, the way that I do it, was if you had an extra phone, if he could at least call in audio. That way we would at least have him there by audio. But I understand it's kind of weird. It is kind of weird because the way I do it, I can really only talk to one person at a time.
Right. Yeah, cool. Oh, that's all good, man. We'll do it either way. It's all good.
One day, for sure, if we can get him on an audio. I don't know if he did mention to me that he didn't have good service, which, I understand that. But if one day, if we could get him on the audio, or I'm going to do one with him too. I already told him me and him's going to do one with just me and him too. But
nice.
We will definitely figure out a way to get all 3 of us on a show.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good idea. Ty is like deep into MMA media. He writes for Bloody Elbow and other big websites. So he's a guy to talk to for sure.
Definitely. So jumping right into it, UFC Milwaukee just happened. Before we get into the winners, the losers, the fights, what was your 2 picks? Edson and Hooker and Al and Lee. What was your 2 predictions going into the fight? Who did you have winning the co-main and the main before it happened?
You know what? I had Quinta in the main, and I thought he was going to win by a decision. I thought the fight was going to look different, though. I didn't think the fight was going to look like that, but I had him winning by a decision. And then the Edson Barbosa, I mean, unless you're a really good wrestler, I pick Edson Barbosa almost over anybody, like in that division, for a lot of reasons. But I had those 2 guys. I thought they were Kevin Lee. I like Kevin Lee. I like watching Kevin Lee. I like listening to Kevin Lee. He puts it out on the line. I like watching him. So it's hard. It hurts me to pick against him sometimes. Who'd you have going into it?
I had Ally Quinta and Edson Barbosa. The same. People were calling me crazy. Yeah. I had people on Twitter, when I picked Al, they're like, "You're crazy." He beat the early Kevin, which that was Kevin's UFC debut. He did not fight the Kevin. I am not a Kevin Lee fan, and people get onto me for it. But I mean, let me take that back. He's a great fighter. You can't watch him and say he sucks at fighting. He's a great fighter.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I just, you have to, his talent is there. You have to acknowledge it. It's there. I just don't like him. You know how you just don't like some fighters personally? You just don't like them. You just, from whatever reason, you just don't fuck with them. And I thought he was going to lose to Edson. I thought Edson was going to murk him. And when he beat Edson, I was like, okay, he's for real. And then people mentioning Khabib and mentioning Conor and Dustin and all these other names. When they brought up Al and it was announced Al, I said right away, Al's going to win that fight. And I guessed it by decision, which, if you watch the first fight, it was kind of similar. Like, if you watch the first fight and the second fight, it was kind of just, instead of 3 rounds, it was 5 rounds. It was very similar.
Yeah, that's what kind of shocked me. I thought you would see some difference and growth in terms of some of the stuff. But you know what? I'll say this though, like Al Iaquinta's boxing looked really impressive to me. To me, it really stood out as a guy who's primarily a wrestler. You know, got the jiu-jitsu background as well. I mean, he's one of Matt Serra's guys. I've trained at a Renzo Gracie camp for 8 years, so I'm always partial to the Renzo guys or Matt Serra, whatever. And but man, when I was watching him throw hands and picking Kevin Lee apart, I was like, "Holy shit, this is not what I was expecting." Really,
it was crazy to watch. What rounds did you give Lee? Because I gave Lee 2 and 3. I gave Al 1.
Yeah.
I gave Al 1, 4, and 5.
Yeah. I was just to me, I gave Lee 2 and 3 for sure. I mean, but round 1 was for sure Iaquinta, and he finished strong. He finished real strong, in my opinion. So yeah, I had it the same way, man.
Yeah, so there was some arguments that he won the first. The first was close, but Lee really didn't. The takedown is looked upon too much in MMA. You got to do something with the takedown. You can't just get it and hold me. You got to do something.
No, you got to do damage. You got to put it to him for it to count. Just to get taken down, if somebody gets popped up, there's no advantage. You know, so to me that's not good enough.
Yeah,
you've got to put him down, keep him down, control him, and do some damage.
I heard one thing that I did see that was ridiculous was somebody said that I think Al got 10-8 in round 5. That to me was the only way, in my opinion, and I said this on Twitter, I was like, the only way you get a 10-8 is if you get 2 knockdowns in 1 round.
Sure.
Yeah, like if 2 knockdowns in 1 round, that justifies a 10-8. Now, obviously, I'm talking standing. Like, if you're just getting Khabib smashed in the face for 5 minutes, that's a 10-8, maybe. But it's hard to get a 10-8 round. It's hard to get a 10-8 round in MMA.
Yeah, they don't happen very often, and you've got to show dominance, like, more than just you're beating somebody, but they're defending themselves. You've got to hurt them.
Yeah,
you know, like that's
2 knockdowns to 0, 2 knockdowns and a wobble to 0, like something like that.
Or even 1 knockdown, and then like let's say you take them down again after that, and you remain on top and pound them out, stuff like that. Then you're showing dominance, you know, in 2 different facets or 2 different scenarios.
They give out 10-8s way too frequently in boxing. Like boxing, if you get a knockdown, it's a 10-8 right away, which I think's crazy.
That doesn't make
sense.
Doesn't make it.
There's a lot of on now about judging, people going off what like the Wilder Fury judges and all this. MMA judges are just as fucking bad sometimes. We've had some horrible decisions in MMA.
Oh God, yeah, we've had judges. I mean, that were bad at scoring boxing fights, let alone trying to figure out what the hell is going on in MMA. You know, like, oh man, boxing's had a bad. We've had a. What's that?
The one that comes to mind right away for me, and people are gonna hate this. It's Gleison Tebow and Khabib Nurmagomedov. If you watch that fight, even the commentator, like Joe Rogan at the end, was like, Khabib lost, and Khabib's he's gonna use this as a lesson. He's right as they're going to announce Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. They're both agreeing, and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean nothing, but it does mean a little. Like Joe Rogan and Mike was both like, he lost, and then the judges went out there and it was 30-27 unanimous for. Khabib, you have probably watched the fight, correct?
Yeah, a long time ago, though.
Yeah, but I just vaguely remember it myself, but I do remember Gleason just holding him up against the cage and winning the fight. I can remember thinking at the end that Gleason had won that fight.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a few. There's, nothing's jumping to mind right away, but I just know because I've had this conversation before with people about bad scoring. I mean, hey, you know what? I mean, not as bad as what I thought, like what we're talking about right now, but one also that stuck out to me, which I just thought was a bad decision, was Diaz Connor too.
I was going to mention that.
I had Diaz winning that fight, man. I was like, I don't get where Connor wins that fight. Like, it was tight, but I just don't see how he came out with it.
I was gonna mention that. You took the words right out of my mouth, and I'm a huge Diaz fan, so I'm biased, of course. But I watched it. I've watched it multiple times, and it depends on two things. And you hear people say this: you don't judge the fight as a whole; you judge it round by round. If you judge it round by round, Connor won. If you judge it as a whole fight, if you take out the minute breaks and the time key, if you take out all that and you just look at the fight, Nate won. So are we judging them off points or are we judging them off fights? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you know what, too, man? Like, I'm sorry. The second I start seeing a guy turn his back and jog, like that, you're not fighting anymore. Like you're giving up a big part of octagon control. That's not fighting anymore, man. So that's damn near surrendering. So
super close now. It was definitely super razor close. I had Diaz by split. I thought one judge would give it to Connor, one judge would give it to Nate, and then it would go to the split, and it would be Nate. Just based on, it's hard to. Connor's one of those guys that if you get him in the 4th and the 5th round, he's fading rapidly, and Diaz doesn't. And I believe like if that was a 10-round fight, if there was no time limit, Nate kills him.
Man, if they were 10-round fights in MMA, Nick and Nate Diaz would be the two greatest fighters walking on planet Earth, because those guys just they have cardio for days. Like for days and days,
Yeah, people are talking shit now about Nick Diaz and the whole never saying he accepted the Jorge Masvidal. I think people, and there's a tweet that I seen earlier, Nick doesn't have to get in scraps to please us anymore. He's a legend in MMA. He, even by never being a UFC champion, and really he didn't even really fight in the UFC that many times. He fought in Strikeforce and other places way more than the UFC, and he's still one of the most well-known UFC fighters. I believe the Diaz brothers are set in stone. If Nate and Nick retired today, Nate and Nick both, and said, I'm never fighting another round, they're in the Hall of Fame. They're good. They're set. We don't have to watch them get in the Diaz 209 scraps, as they call it, for our own enjoyment.
No, you're right, man. They're legends. They've done all they needed to do. What drives me nuts about this, though, is I'm a Nick Diaz fan. So when I hear Nick Diaz is coming back after 4 years or however long it's been exactly, I'm like, man, I want to see Nick Diaz fight this guy. I want to see Nick Diaz fight that guy. Perfect. Let's get this shit going. And then I hear, oh, now he's bitching about the money thing again. And I get it, because he's from the old school. They didn't get paid what guys are getting paid now. He wants to make his money, and he should. He deserves it. But before you go announcing these goddamn fights, let's make sure this is set in stone. Get Nick his money and get his ass in the octagon, because I want to see him fight, as do millions of other people.
Definitely, and I'm a huge, I've got the old Metal Militia skull tatted on me that says 209, like the old days Metal Militia. And my youngest son is named Nathan after Nate Diaz. So I am a huge Diaz fan. And I'm the same. Like, I have every single Nate Diaz fight on. I'm more of a Nate fan than a Nick fan, but a huge Nick fan too. I have every single Nate Diaz fight on DVD. But like when we haven't seen him fight since the second Conor fight. We had the Dustin, and then it fell apart because of Dustin, not because of Nate. But I would definitely be lying if I said I didn't want to see him fight. Every time, win or lose, a Diaz fight is exciting. Like when Nate fought Connor, when Nate fought Connor, when Nate fought Cowboy, when Nate fought Takanori Gomi. Like every single Nate Diaz or Nick Diaz fight is exciting, whether they win or lose.
Agreed, man. They bring it. They're tough. Their style makes for exciting fights. And, people love to either love them or hate them based on their attitude and the way that they are. So it makes for a great fight week and a great fight weekend.
So another big headline, and I don't know if it's official yet, Jeremy Stephens and Zabit Magomedsharipov. Did you see if it's finalized yet or no?
I have not seen anything about it. I've been scrolling a lot, though, in the last 24 hours. I haven't seen anything.
Oh, but you did know that it's in the works.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But I haven't heard anything finalized about it.
Well, Ariel said that it was going in the right direction, and what Ariel says is pretty much gold. So I believe that it's in there, and I tweeted out earlier yesterday, I believe, Jeremy Stephens will beat Zabit Magomedsharipov, mark my words. Do you agree? Do you think Jeremy Stephens derails this hype train, or do you think Jeremy Stephens gets run over?
Man, Jeremy Stephens is a veteran, and he possesses a lot of skills. You could look at him as a good gatekeeper for this fight, or you could be looking at him as the smart, wily veteran who's going to end, like you said, end the hype train. In these situations, usually I see the hype is for real. And when they put these vets up against these, it generally goes for the younger up and coming fighter. So with that being said, I don't know. I don't think Jeremy Stephens is going to get the job done.
There's two moments in MMA that stick out to me: my happiest and my saddest. My happiest MMA moment, and this kind of ties, my happiest MMA moment was here recently when Donald Cowboy Cerrone beat Mike Perry at home in Denver. Like, that was a good moment for Cowboy. And my worst was when Jose Aldo TKO'd Jeremy Stephens in Calgary. I am a huge Jeremy Stephens fan. Jeremy Stephens can very easily be the featherweight champion right now. Like, if Jeremy Stephens connects with Aldo's chin and puts him to sleep, he fights Holloway. If Jeremy Stephens connects on Holloway's chin, he's going to sleep. Like he has the tools to knock out anybody.
Oh yeah.
It's just
like
you said, getting it done. But that was one of my most heartbreaking moments when he lost to Aldo. But there's just something. I believe his leg kicks will play a big part in the Zabit fight. I believe his toughness will play a big part. And Zabit reminds me of MVP, Michael Venom Page. Flashy, very flashy. But what are you going to do if that flashiness fails? What are you going to do if you're in the third round, deep in the third round, and Jeremy's still there, still throwing punches at you, and your flashy kicks and your flashy spinning attacks aren't really working?
Well, I guess we're going to find out, man. I guess we're going to find out.
Definitely. But a lot of people, like yourself, are taking Zabit in that one. But I think it's going to be close. I think it would be... I just got to... you just have feelings sometimes. I feel like Zabit eventually is going to run into a very, very tough matchup that he just is not going to... Like when Frankie fought Yair. Yair was unstoppable, and then Frankie smashed him.
Yeah, Frankie Edgar, though, is a very special fighter. But not to take anything away from Stephens, man, he's no walkover, and that anyone who thinks that he's just going to get walked over is out of their mind.
Yeah. So another big headline coming up, and you'll notice as we do episodes and as we do stuff together, I always tend to lead towards the underdog. Like for some reason in fights, I like the underdog. Depending on who it is, like if it's an overwhelming odds, obviously. But I think Alexander Gustafsson is going to beat John Jones, and here's why. John has been out for a while. Gustafsson has been out for a while too. His last fight was Glover Teixeira, but think back to that Glover fight. I mean, those combinations, those uppercuts, those hooks. Gustafsson, in the first fight, they fought at UFC 165, I believe, in Canada, and arguably Gustafsson won. Now, I rewatched it, and I did score it for Jones. I did think John won, but it was super, super close, and it was definitely his toughest fight. Just something in me, it's kind of like you got a feeling. I just got a feeling, and I think evidence will kind of prove it, that when John fought Ovin St. Preux, he didn't look that good, and that was after his layoff.
Oh, yeah.
And I just believe that John is not going to dominate Gustafsson. People are saying John's going to finish him. People are saying John's going to dominate him. I just don't see it.
No, yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you brought up John's last fight. Or no, sorry, OSP, the OSP fight. He looked like his timing wasn't there. He was hesitant at times. Didn't have great fluent combinations. It just wasn't there. But he was still, he's still great, right? When I saw the Gustafsson fight for the first time, I had Gus winning that fight. I thought Gus won. He will be, and I think he'll always be, John Jones's toughest fight in that his skill set with his height nullifies the things that John Jones has over people. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Gustafsson's wrestling has gotten better even since they fought that one time. And then Gustafsson's striking has always been probably the best part of his game. So putting those two things together, John has incredible reach. So when he strikes with guys, the reach becomes a factor. Now, he puts together great combinations. He's very creative and dynamic. I'm not taking away any of those things. But Gustafsson has a very good striking background, and he's tall. John is not looking down on Gus, right? Like, that changes dynamics. That changes confidence. How many guys does John Jones spar with in the gym like that? How many guys? How many guys are his height, that are as good as Gus? I'm going to say very few to next to none. So that's why I always believe Gus will always be his hardest fight.
Yeah, for sure. And John Jones, everybody lists John Jones like number one, greatest of all time, greatest talent. I've done a greatest list, and it's all opinions. Everybody has their own opinions. To me,
right,
John Jones will always be number two behind Anderson. Now, people are, Anderson Silva, back in his prime, and you know this, I mean, when he fought Rich Franklin those two times, when he fought Chris Lieben, when he fought Dan Henderson, I mean, Anderson Silva to me, and if you're going to bring up steroids for Anderson, you could bring up steroids for John. It's like they're both even on there. And if you're going to bring up out of the cage issues, Anderson has never really been arrested that I know of, nothing like that. To me, on my greatest pound for pound list, I got Anderson 1, John 2. Do you agree? What's your opinion on that? Would you put Anderson above John, or would you lean towards John?
Yeah. When Anderson first came in to the UFC, and it was like he had a laser beam on his strikes. He could pinpoint any part of somebody and just put them to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was laser point precision, but man, geez, that's hard. When you think of Anderson Silva in his prime, he was invincible. He was Michael Jordan of MMA.
Yeah.
And the comparison that I draw a lot with John Jones, I always say he's like the LeBron James of MMA, because he's so gifted genetically, and just so athletic. It's so hard to put it, but I'm partial to Anderson. I've met Anderson, so it's very hard to not go. And I remember, just like you, I remember Anderson when he was coming into the UFC and how he was just murking everybody. I mean, nobody knocking guys out in heavier weight classes, walking backwards. Like, oh, I love Anderson. I love Anderson. So I'll go with Anderson. But if I was really to sit there and say, okay, just based on what not what your heart says, but what your mind says, I'd probably lean towards Jones. Just thinking if they fought, Jones would find maybe a way to beat him. I don't know.
My biggest the biggest travesty, I guess you could say, the biggest mistake that UFC ever did was not matching Anderson versus John when Anderson was the king. Like right when Anderson front kicked Vitor, and right when John Jones beat Rashad. I think that might have been in the same ballpark. Maybe I might be wrong there, but right around in that 2013, 2014. Right then, you should have had Anderson Silva move up to 205, and that would have been a legit super fight.
Oh, that would have been probably the biggest super fight of all time.
Before the term super fight was even in MMA.
Exactly. That would have started it all, actually. I remember hearing, though, that Anderson did not want to fight John, that he liked John, he respected John. I remember hearing something about that, and I believe it came from Anderson. So that could have been a thing, and that was when Anderson was also vying for a fight with Roy Jones or with George St. Pierre.
Yeah. And
so
I would lean towards
there was something to that. That would have been a great super fight.
Yeah, I would lean towards Anderson.
What's that?
If Anderson and Jones, if that would a prime John Jones and a prime Anderson Silva, I'm leaning towards Anderson because, and I think the turning point would be submissions, because John has never really been submitted. He's never been submitted at all. He was in danger once with the armbar with Vitor, but I believe, and we all know Anderson, like prime Anderson, when he triangled Chael in the 5th round, I believe submissions would play a part. Like prime Anderson, prime John, same striking, similar reach, similar build. John's probably a little taller, a little heavier, but I would lean towards Anderson. I think Anderson would have a well more than fair shot at it.
Yeah, you know what? Anderson on the ground would have an advantage, whether he was on his back or not. And I believe that. I think the only place that John would have a significant advantage would be if he pressed Anderson against the cage, almost like a Randy Couture style fight. If he did that, I could see Anderson being in some trouble, but he wouldn't want to strike with Anderson too long, and he'd have to shoot and take him down at some point. So it'd be dangerous for John in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier today too. I seen some random tweet, and we'll get off here in just a second because my phone's about to die. I don't want it to cut off, but I mentioned earlier, somebody asked, what's one rematch in MMA that you want? And they mentioned, everybody says Max Holloway, Conor McGregor. Everybody says John Jones, DC, like them kind of early shit. And I'm like, think hard on this one. And I was like, think back to Anderson Silva's very first fight in the UFC. Chris Lieben. Chris Lieben was on a 6-fight win streak, and he was 1 fight away from a title shot. I would be very, very curious to see what a Chris Lieben and Anderson Silva 2018 fight would look like. Because if Chris Lieben beat Vanderlei Silva after that. He beat Yoshihiro Akiyama. He went on to beat Aaron Simpson. A lot of good guys. I would like to see a 2018, 2019 Anderson Silva, Chris Lieben.
Well, yeah, that'd be interesting to see who would hold up. Like, it'd be like, yeah, man. The dynamics of that have really changed over the years. You know, Anderson's chin's not what it used to be. Wow. His striking's not what it doesn't have the same pop that it used to, which he's older. It's natural.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Could go either way.
I think that would be.
Could go either way now.
Yeah, because Lieben's got dynamite in his. Lieben can be 80 years old and he can still KO you with one shot.
Yeah, he's not about precision and timing and all that. He has knockout power, and he's got a chin that he sticks out there, and he's willing to take a shot to give a shot. So, yeah, you're right. That'd be interesting. Be interesting.
Nobody thinks about old matchups. You know, nobody thinks about Chuck Liddell, Vitor, the old Chuck Liddell, Vitor, or back when who was it? Back when somebody like Mark Hunt fought Melvin Manhoff in Pride, way back in the day, like fights like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. That's oh yeah. If you get back in the day, that'd be and especially if you want to bring them into fighting now, crazy how the dynamics would change in a lot of those fights.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate your time, and I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, man, me too. I like this collabo with the Smoke Break MMA podcast and all 5 rounds. I'm definitely thinking at some point we should do it again soon.
Definitely, sir. I don't know when the next card is, but I believe it's a pay-per-view next, right? It's John and Gus. That's next.
John and Gus. I think it's the 29th.
Yeah, so we'll probably, if you want to, we'll get together and do a reaction video after John and Gus.
Sure, man. Sounds good. Let's do it.
And just as soon as it's done uploading, I'm going to upload it. And as soon as it's done uploading, I will tag you and tweet it out to you so you can post it too.
Awesome, man. Sounds good.
And I appreciate your time, man. It was really good talking MMA. We actually talked about a lot of pretty in-deep things.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it too, man. It was good. It's always good talking with somebody who knows about the sport and stuff and the history of it too. So yeah, man. It was great talking with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate it, man. You have a good night.
All right. You too, bro.
That was a pretty good one. I hope you guys enjoyed it, as my hair is fucked up like a motherfucker. I ain't got no pomade in it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Go check him out on Twitter. Go check him out on Facebook. All 5 Rounds Podcast. Good listen. We're going to get his partner on here too. We're going to figure out a way to get us all 3 if I have to figure out something. But we will figure it out. I appreciate everybody who likes and subscribes. And tomorrow, or within the next 3 to 5 days, I'm going to be doing a When It Happens to You Part 2, which, as you all know, is the breast cancer story that me and my wife are we're going through now. Wednesday, she's starting chemo. And there's just a lot of news. I'm going to save it for the video, but a lot of news coming up on my wife's condition and all that. But this was a good one. I like this one. Me and him clicked well. It's like we go good together. We talked. He knows his MMA. I know my MMA. And like he said, it's good to talk with somebody who actually is knowledgeable of the sport. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good night.